Chapter 43. The Second Wife. Alicent. A speeding shadow passed the window, casting Aegon's chamber into sudden darkness before flicking away. Alicent looked over, her head dulled with a bone-weary exhaustion after a tiring week with little sleep. By the time her eyes focused on the window, whichever dragon had passed was long gone. Aegon stirred. Her head snapped back to her son. Was he waking up? The maesters had tried to ease his pain with milk of the poppy, but though it kept him in a dazed stupor since his fall, it hadn't been enough to keep him asleep throughout the procedure. He'd woken up as the hot knife cut into his leg, and Aegon hadn't known what was happening. Before they started, he'd been unconscious, and so they could not warn him of what needed to be done. His desperation and shock had been heart-wrenching, and to do naught but keep him down whilst the maesters cut his leg off, it felt like her spirit was being torn to shreds. "It'll be over soon. I know it hurts, but it must be done to save your life. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Alicent had muttered those empty condolences the entire time. Had she not? Surely she'd talked to him, even if Aegon likely hadn't heard much. Soon his pleas were reduced to intangible screams as he fought against the constraining bindings keeping him tied to the bed. For a man so broken, he sure hadn't made it easy, until the seven were good and made him pass out. Aegon hadn't woken since, and all Alicent could do was watch him, terrified that if she looked away, he'd stop breathing. There were times Alicent felt like the only thing keeping him alive was her. Alicent combed her tangled auburn hair behind her ear with bloodied fingernails, torn from biting and fidgeting. The room still held the scent of milk of the poppy, but underneath the sweetness she could smell the blood. Rotten wine permeating the room. "Oh, Aegon, they took your leg. I'm so sorry. I tried everything I could, but they said there was no other way, and now you'll never walk again. What are we going to do?" But try as she might, Alicent couldn't think further than the next sunset, though she felt very much alone in that. Whilst her heart grew cold and her mouth turned silent, her father had so much to say these days. Whenever she stepped outside her son's sick room, her father would bombard her with so many what-ifs, yet Alicent couldn't fathom how he could do that. Her firstborn son, his grandson, was hanging on to life by the treacherous endurance of spider threads. Yet all her father could think about was fucking politicking. She didn't want to hear his plans, his excuses. It meant nothing but perfidy when her father's latest schemes only served a purpose granted his eldest grandson died. At least when he'd urged Alicent to soothe the king's grief as a young maiden and gain his favour, her father had the courtesy to wait with the schemes until Queen Aemma Arryn was actually dead. To say his ruthless focus blindsided her would be a lie though, because Aemma Arryn might have been dead, but he'd also began making Alicent the next queen before they'd had time to change either their funeral attires. Alicent had felt conflicted by the suddenness then too, going from comforting Rhaenyra after her mother's funeral in the afternoon, then changing into her mother's gown to see the king in the evening. As a grown woman whose naivete was snuffed out decades ago, Alicent knew her father too well by now. That memory was ancient history, and she scarcely recognized the young maiden she'd once been, whilst her father hadn't changed one bit. She'd thought it'd be different with Aegon on the line, but to see him push onwards as if her sons were interchangeable enraged her. Alicent hadn't known she held it in her to be this wroth with him. How could he do this to her? To Aegon? What was the purpose of all his grand plans if not for the sake of their family? What was the point of anything anymore, when his efforts should be in service of seeing Aegon live? Not making plans for his demise by putting ideas into Aemon's head and driving a rift between her younger children. Even the spawn of Daemon was showing more tact. Did her father not see how strong Aegon was? He'd overcome harms some of the strongest knights of the realm would have succumbed to. Wasn't that a sign from the Seven he would live? It had to. Alicent couldn't handle any other reality. When Alicent closed her eyes, she could still remember Aegon dancing at his wedding. Graceful, sure-footed, and healthy as a horse. It was only days ago. What she wouldn't do for the power to undo his relentless misfortunes. This and all the rest. From being the first son in Targaryen history whose claims were dismissed by their own father, to the curse of a wife he'd been inflicted with. Alicent should have known any offspring of demons would be just as accursed as him. Like father, like daughter, and Alicent had been a fool to think otherwise. Whenever she wasn't burning with rage, regret threatened to consume her. Alicent recalled how Aegon would skip down the staircase with barely a sound, his fair hair swaying behind him. It had always been left in a tangled mess, until Aegon had enough and cut it off. Personally, Alicent had not been fond of the short hair, as it wasn't the way of Targaryens, but Aegon had been pleased to no longer struggle with the knots, and had kept it short since. Her eldest used to be such a bright little boy too. He'd been hale and charming, if maybe a little undisciplined and lazy. Even then, despite never quite straining himself to his fullest potential, Aegon had been decent with a sword too. It ached to see him this way. This crippled, broken man was not her son. A strange sound reached her ears, and Alicent glanced once more towards the window. From her vantage point, she couldn't glimpse any dragons, even though that had unmistakably been the sound of a dragon's growl. Who could be out flying, on the day of all days? And how come they were flying so close to the castle Alicent could hear them? Her pondering ceased when Aegon stirred once more. "Shh," he mumbled intangibly, his head turning towards the window. "Is mouse is wine?" "Aegon? You're a horse, Mum," he slurred, only to fall still once more. She was a horse? Despite herself, Alicent cracked a smile. "I am? What is Aemond then?" Donkey." Alicent bit her lip, holding in a sudden urge to laugh, though a brief moment of incredulity went away when he stopped moving and said no more. There was a knock on the door, and Maester Orwell was escorted inside with Sir Criston. "My queen," Sir Criston said softly. "What is it, sir?" she asked, noticing the concern on his face, but of late, when wasn't he concerned? Her knight had seen to her well-being throughout this horrible week. Her sworn protector would remind her to eat whenever she'd forget, and make sure her duties were completed whilst the queen was indisposed. What she appreciated most was that, unlike the rest, Sir Criston never once spoke of Aegon dying. When she'd despaired the most, he'd been the one to remind her of hope. "Aegon is strong, but this is an injury the rest of us can scarcely imagine, my queen. Please trust in the maesters to know what will serve Aegon's recovery best. I know you wish you could heal him with your own hands, but that is their expertise, not yours or mine." "I can't sit here and do nothing!" "You are not. What Aegon needs now is the will to fight, and there's no one like you, my queen, to give a man will when he's at his darkest." His words had brought back memories of what Sir Criston nearly did during Rhaenyra's wedding to Sir Laenor. He'd lost his temper and killed Sir Joffrey Longmouth, and afterwards, shame and broken oaths made him go to the courtyard to kill himself too. But Alicent had stopped it. She then shielded the knight by removing him from Rhaenyra's service and over to her own, while Sir Laenor was still trying to get him hanged for the murder of his friend. Sure, such a close friend he'd name his son after the knight a decade later. Had he truly held proper respect for the dead knight that went beyond his unnatural lusts, he wouldn't name his wife's bastard after someone he supposedly held in high regard. At any rate, Sir Criston's gratitude for her pardon saw him become one of the most capable and loyal men since. Yet it wasn't a fair comparison. Aegon had his body broken, while Sir Criston had only broken an oath. A mere pardon couldn't make Aegon right again the way it had the Kingsguard, though she understood what he was trying to tell her. Alicent was the Queen of Westeros, a mother and a Hightower. She would need to light the way, to serve as Aegon's willpower whenever her son grew too fatigued to fight alone, and prevent him from drifting into darkness. Sir Criston stepped up to the foot of Aegon's bed. "Your sons, Aemond and Daeron, request Prince Aegon be moved to the lower chambers, Your Grace." "No," Alicent said, shuddering at the mere thought of moving Aegon anywhere. She glanced to Maester Orwell, who had walked up to see how Aegon was faring. "He's resting. Why would he ask such a thing?" They brought Sunfire to the castle, my queen. They've ordered one of the stables be emptied and will chain him there. They expressed a hope proximity would do both Aegon and Sunfire good. They what? Had they lost their mind? They'd approach Sunfire now? How could anyone allow that? Why hadn't they been stopped? Did they mean for Alicent to lose all her sons? Are they? They are well, my queen, and Sunfire is behaving as well as can be expected to, or so the handlers claimed. They were aided by Lady Heriel, Lady Bela and their dragons. I believe you may be able to see them outside from the window. Pushing back her chair, Alicent stood up and walked over to the window. She had to angle her head, but she quickly caught sight of Vermithor flying high above the castle. Daeron and Viserion were circling above the gate, while Sunfire and the dragon Norbert were on the ground in the largest courtyard. Alicent thought Lady Heriel had returned to Dragonstone, but that was undoubtedly her. Had Alicent misunderstood? Was it only Lord Rubius who left? And maybe she was confusing who had left after the wedding and those who remained. Alicent was so tired, and all her energy had been on Aegon. In the courtyard, Lady Heriel was standing next to her dragon Norbert. Sunfire was close by, neck low, shoulders coiled and flacking his teeth at the she-dragon. All dragons were monstrous beasts, and no such creature could accurately be defined as beautiful. But when compared amongst each other, there were clear outliers that were more pleasing on the eye. Sunfire was known for being the most beautiful dragon there had ever been, whilst Norbert might be considered the ugliest. They were about equal in size, though Sunfire glimmered in the afternoon light. The lines of his muscular, limber body regaled to behold. His serpentine face was sharp, symmetrical, and proportioned well with the rest of his body. Her son's dragon struck a pleasant balance between strength and grace. Compared to him, Norbert appeared a spiked boar with wings. It wasn't only Sunfire either. All the younger female dragons had their own femininity which faded with age, whilst Norbert remained young but not any sort of feminine. Her bulky head and neck were full of copper horns that stuck out sporadically down to her spiky morning star of a tail. Her snout was rounded, the jaw wide, and so full of vicious teeth the mouth barely fit them all. Her powerful body was not slender, but broad and muscly. Norbert wasn't quite as grimly to look at as Vhagar, but Vhagar was over a century older and war-worn. It was the fact Norbert was only 5 years old, yet already looks meaner than those decades older than her that gave Alicent pause. If she grew any more horns, she'd soon be a flying, flame-throwing hedgehog. All in all, Norbert looked particularly dangerous, which Alicent figured might be considered a boon amongst dragons. Did dragons care if their scales were golden or their figures slender? Likely not. Strength was all that mattered amongst monsters. As different as they looked, their behaviors matched better. Norbert and Sunfire were growling, snorting sparks of fire from their maws and snapping at each other. Sunfire tried to bite her neck, and Norbert retaliated with a blast of blue fire. So hot the cold winter air erupted into steam. But Sunfire snarled as if he found the fire a mere inconvenience because it got into his eyes. "This is supposed to be good behavior?" she asked her Kristen sharply. He'd come up behind her and craned his neck to see what she referred to. "Aye, my queen. The handlers said they are focused on each other and in a way that is not yet truly aggressive for dragons. Lady Heriel was the one who went into the pit tunnels with Norbert and released Sunfire from his chains. And if it had gone badly, it should have been then. The handlers said their behavior here is of two dragons testing each other's strength and temperaments, not going for the kill. That is far more violent than this." Mayhaps. He made a fair point, as Alicent recalled what nearly came to pass when they first tried letting Vermithor into the dragon pit. After decades spent apart, Dreamfire acted badly to be made to share a home with Vermithor, and it almost ended in battle. Their furious roars had been heard echoing across King's Landing, and hadn't Aemond and Helena been there, it would have come to blows, and one of the dragons may have died, likely Dreamfire. Even though she was Vermithor's older sister, the two had never been known to get along, and the blue and silver dragon was smaller than her younger brother. At any rate, they'd quickly realized Vermithor had grown too large for the dragon pit, and they'd had no choice but to find an alternative lodging. They said Vermivore and Dreamfire's animosity stemmed from their first riders, the siblings King Jaehaerys and his older sister, Dowager Queen Rhaena, who disagreed over the succession over 80 years past. They'd been the grandchildren of Aegon the Conqueror himself, and there'd been 5 royal siblings then, just as there was now. Rhaena Targaryen was born the oldest, while Jaehaerys and Elisane were the 2 youngest. Initially, Rhaena was said to be queen, but not in her own right for being the eldest, but through her marriage to her brother husband, Aegon the Uncrowned. That future was shattered when they'd been usurped by Maegor, who killed the rightful heir before their cruel uncle took his dead nephew's wife as one of his own black brides. After Maegor died, many believed Rhaena was the rightful ruler of Westeros, and if not her, then it was her eldest daughter, Princess Arya. Arya was the heir of her father Aegon the Uncrowned. Maegor the Cruel and the traditions of Westeros both said that if there were no brothers, one should favor daughters before uncles. That never came to pass, because once Maegor mysteriously died, King Jaehaerys took the Iron Throne for himself by dismissing the claims of both his sister and niece. Alicent felt a kinship with the long-dead Queen Rhaena, who she'd learned of in bits and pieces as a side character in everyone else's tale. Be it from tales of the end of the Conqueror's life, King Aenys, King Aegon, King Jaehaerys or Queen Elisane. She was found across them all, but never the main point. The unfortunate queen who was made to walk ahead and take the brute force of the punches of the faith militant, the people, and her own family. And all she achieved was to clear the path of obstacles for Jaehaerys and Elisane's great reign, with little but dismissal and further griefs as her payment. Outshined in death as she'd been in life by her hypocritical little sister Elisane, who put insult to injury when she would not stop nagging about her daughter's right to inherit the throne, whilst also ignoring the little detail of how she only became queen by supplanting her older sister and nieces through her support of her own brother husband Jaehaerys. It was the sort of hypocrisy Alicent recognized all too well. She only had to endure Rhaenyra squeezing out a litter of bastards while declaring her father's favoritism to know how humiliated Dowager Queen Rhaena must have felt, watching Elisane preach for her daughter's right to inherit because they were older than the brothers. Elisane had been a good queen in other regards, but that was ludicrous. In total, Queen Alicent gave the old king 13 children, yet misfortune saw that none of their sons inherited the throne, and eventually he chose his grandson Viserys as the next king with the support of the Lords of the Council of 101. Despite Princess Rhaenys making a life of solid political choices, Viserys was chosen as the overwhelming favourite. It was hard to argue why Princess Rhaenys had a right to the Iron Throne when Dowager Queen Rhaena and her daughter were passed over twice. To do that would be undermining Jaehaerys' own reign. And had the decades of prosperity not proved he'd been the rightful monarch all along? It was a simple fact of life that the Lords of Westeros would sooner heed the whispers of a king before the screams of a queen. Alicent had been made to feel that reality all too well. The realm had spoken their verdict on this time and time again, and comparatively, Princess Rhaenyra had an even weaker claim than what princesses and queens who tried before her had. The only reason she still threatened Alicent's line wasn't the princess's own shaky claim, but how her first husband had been Sir Laenor. There were a few who speculated whether the Council of 101 got it wrong, mostly the Velaryons themselves. Therefore, to support Rhaenyra meant the old succession disputes could be made right through the sons of the 2 lines. Except the soiled princess ruined any chance of using that validity spectacularly when birthing 3 bastards of House Strong instead. Now that Daemon saw Laenor dead, as had become his way of resolving an issue whenever a better person stood in his path to power, it was Rhaenyra's claim combined with her murdering uncle that made it difficult. Yet their combined claims were lesser than the birthright of a king's son. Alicent agreed Helaena was behind Rhaenyra in the succession, but not Aegon, Aemond and Daeron. The traditions, customs and the rules of Westeros were clear. Rules of inheritance did not favor younger sons before elder sons. Rules of inheritance did not favor bastards before trueborn, and rules of inheritance sure as hell did not favor daughters before sons. Since all those customs remain true today as it had 100 years ago, then it meant the superior claimant to the throne belonged to Aegon and Aegon alone. Instead, her poor son was made to grow up with the court whispering and wondering what ailed Alicent's progeny for a king's son to be spurned in favor of a lying, cheating, feeble princess who kept ruining every chance she'd been given. What did Rhaenyra expect if she took the throne? That she'd rule? Rhaenyra must be blinder than her father then. Now that she'd spread her legs for her disinherited uncle and granted him his long sought out access back to power, Daemon would be the future king. Rhaenyra wouldn't be able to control her uncle any more than Dowager Queen Rhaena had been able to stop her uncle Maegor from claiming the kingdom and killing her brothers. At least the Dowager Queen had been responsible and loved her siblings. But Rhaenyra made every stupid decision based on selfish greed without a care for either the kingdom or her siblings. If she'd valued the well-being of either, she should have married Aegon after Laenor died, instead of Daemon. If she for once in her life prioritized her duty over her pleasures, Alicent's son would not have been stuck with the spawn of Daemon for bride, the treacherous girl who lured him to the icy belfry and made him fall. Her son would not be broken. Even if Aegon wouldn't be happily married, he'd at least be whole and hale, and the future of the realm would have been secure. For the first time in the last 100 years, there could have been a transition of power that wasn't highly contested, but the obvious solution was squandered once again. Viserys once claimed he made Rhaenyra his heir to save the realm from Daemon, but whom was he protecting by disinheriting his sons? Rhaenyra's pride? Why had Viserys looked upon their Aegon as a babe, the son he'd been so desperate for he killed Aemma for one, but decided then and there the child Alicent gave him was not worthy? Why did he keep making Alicent bear his children only to dismiss them too? Then grind salt into the wounds by playing blind to Jacaerys, Viserys and Joffrey's bastardy? It had been impossible for Aegon not to be affected by the neglect his own father put him through. Now, Aegon lay in the bed in front of her, broken, but showing a strength even the fiercest warriors would succumb to, and at the same time he'd become broken in a way that people would find fault with. Even his own blood would look down on him for this, and it was another unfairness he'd been made to suffer on top of being the only firstborn son in Westeros to be passed over. All her sons shared in that constant embarrassment. And to what purpose? To tear the realm apart? To make it impossible for House Targaryen to be whole? What extraordinary accomplishment had Rhaenyra achieved which made her suited to rule the kingdom which didn't want her for queen? They must have failed to inform Alicent of the miracles she'd performed, because all she'd seen was Rhaenyra squandering each opportunity her father pushed on her. Aegon mumbled. Mindfully, she stroked his silver hair back from his clammy face. Like most of his communication whilst under the milk of the poppy, it made little sense. Aegon reacted more disoriented than Viserys did to the substance. "What are you trying to say, Aegon?" She tried, not sure he could understand, but hoping he was aware enough to know he wasn't alone. "More toes." His face pinched. "Hurts." "It'll get better." Alicent closed her eyes. "You must keep strong, and I promise it will get better." Made raw with old hurts and renewed fears for her son's future, Alicent had to stay clear of her husband, which was easily possible within Aegon's chamber when his father never visited. Alicent feared that if she saw him, she'd grasp her husband by his rotting shoulders and shake him into seeing sense, and remind Viserys how he'd become king in the first place, to make him realize the danger he was putting all his children in, from his precious Rhaenyra to Daeron, whom he scarcely seemed to remember existed, and all the way to his bastard grandchildren. If Viserys truly loved them as much as he claimed, how could he do this? Did he hate Alicent so deeply for not being Aemma? Were their children worthless to him because they were also hers? The fact Rhaenyra had slid out from between Aemma's legs and not Alicent's was the only argument that defended his succession decision. So caught up honoring ghosts he neglected the safety of the living. Viserys was splitting the realm apart and simultaneously putting the blame for it at Alicent's feet for birthing his sons. It was so maddeningly unfair that Alicent felt numb with it. What was the purpose in life when Viserys was making everything she'd learned was honorable out to be a lie? Alicent was the one steadfastly keeping to her duty, yet her husband treated their marriage as if her only purpose was serving as the king's whore. Lured into a trap by the promise of a life beyond anything a daughter of a second son could hope for, only to be treated like Viserys' illicit mistress. Because if he truly acknowledged Alicent as his lawful wife the way he swore to the Seven and the Realm the day he made her queen, how come he ordered the claims of their children be worth less than bastards? To think, once upon a time Alicent had loved him so dearly. When she'd first arrived at the capital, she'd been awed by the generosity of King Viserys and aspired to be like Queen Aemma. She'd thought Princess Rhaenyra flew on Syrax into the stars to hang the moon. She too had been blinded by Rhaenyra then, but unlike her husband, she'd left her childish naivety behind and faced reality. All her love and admiration had been soaked up, only to be spat out with lies, treachery and humiliation. When Queen Aemma gave him a sickly son, the dying boy was made heir to the kingdom upon birth, and was nicknamed Heir for a Day by an uncle celebrating his nephew's death. When Alicent gave him 3 hale, strong sons and another daughter, Viserys was content to pretend they didn't exist. Simply speaking, the words Heir for a Day had seen Daemon disinherited and exiled, whilst Rhaenyra could commit no offence bad enough worth the same consequences. Not for cuckolding her husband and tearing down the crown's relations with House Velaryon. Not for marrying Daemon after Viserys explicitly declared his brother could not be allowed near the throne, not even after making a bastard her heir. Alicent shuddered to think how she'd suffer if she'd cuckolded the king and tried passing her obvious bastards as his true-born progeny. She would have lost her head at the execution block. Sometimes, Alicent wondered whether any of it was worth it. When she dreamed of relocating her children back to the Hightower, even if it was a place she hadn't seen since childhood. Despite scarcely recalling how it looked, most times it was only the inconvenience of their dragons that stopped her. Still the longing persisted, where she so dearly wished she'd stayed Lady Alicent, and her children were anyone else's but his. But they were, and neither Alicent or the king or Rhaenyra could change that. They existed, and it was about time someone took responsibility for that except herself. Even a king was not above rule and tradition, and Westeros had never accepted a woman as their ruler. Not Queen Visenya, nor Dowager Queen Rhaena, Princess Arya, or Princess Rhaenys. And they would not accept Rhaenyra either when by all the laws, traditions and customs of the realm, her 3 brothers were ahead of her in succession. It was that simple. But somehow Viserys had learned nothing from the Targaryen history. The older succession strife was mostly forgotten after Dowager Queen Rhaena's death, except for their dragons. They had not forgotten, and it appeared the old animosity lingered between Vermithor and Dreamfire to this day, or so the dragon handlers claimed. Alicent wasn't convinced it went that deep. Some beasts simply didn't like a threat, and Dreamfire had always preferred her solitude. "I don't care for their biting," Alicent said, watching as Norbert chewed into Sunfire's wing. It couldn't have been too hard, as Sunfire wrenched free of the she-dragon's grip, but he kept snarling and trampling around the courtyard with little regard to be mindful. Is it safe for Lady Harriel to be so close while they're acting this way? She may be harmed accidentally. The lady assured me she had control, Sir Criston answered. And she's the only one who can communicate with Sunfire now. She's talked to Sunfire? Sir Criston paused. Not exactly. She said Aegon's dragon don't speak with her the way dragons such as Norbert, Vhagar and Moondancer are able to. Though to get around that, as I understand it, Lady Harriel talks to Norbert, who then talks to Sunfire on her behalf. A dragon acting as a translator of sorts. Both ways. Alicent didn't understand how Lady Harriel could speak with some dragons but not all, though she'd seen too much to question the validity of the gift. Would her grandchildren someday carry that ability as well? Rubius could not whisper to dragons, but neither was he the one who would marry her son. They believe letting him rest closer to Sunfire may aid his recovery, she asked her sworn protector. Your sons claim it can give him strength. By proximity alone? She'd heard such tales before, but never been certain if it was true or not, or if it was the sheer confidence Targaryens felt from holding the loyalty of a power such as a dragon. After all, a man with a sword usually felt more powerful than a man without. Though with that in mind, older children expressed comfort with their dragons close, and at this point, what was there to lose? Alicent walked over to Aegon's mirror by the dressing room, only to quickly turn her face away from her reflection. She didn't care for the exhausted woman looking back. "Would you call for my coat, Sir Criston?" "Yes, my queen." She ran her hand through her unruly hair, her fingers getting caught on the tangles. It wouldn't do for anyone to see their queen so unkempt. "And my hat, the one made of shadowcat fur." She looked from her knight to Mr. Orwyle. "Can my son be safely moved?" Orwyle nodded. "With care, yes, your grace. Granted his new chambers are adequately warm, equipped and cleaned, we should be able to move the prince there safely." Alicent nodded. "Then, if it may help, do it." A light haze of snow fell from the grey sky when Alicent reached the courtyard. After Lady Harriel landed with the dragons, she'd been joined by Bela in the courtyard, who looked an entirely different girl when she smiled and laughed, even if it was a merriment that went away the moment they noticed the queen. Seeing her approach them, Harriel turned away from the dragons to come meet her, whilst the little husband-hater kept a step behind, content to use her friend as a shield. Alicent wished Bela could be sent back to Dragonstone as she demanded after Aegon's fall, but she'd calmed down since, and knew it was better to keep control of her. Daemon was a little less dangerous whilst they held his daughter, though not as much as Alicent liked. Bonds of family had not stopped Daemon before. He'd likely killed both his wife and cousin. He'd celebrated the death of his baby nephew, and even if they had Bela, he kept his other daughter Rhaena to himself. Alicent wished the sisters could have traded, and Rhaena was the one married to Aegon, whilst Bela could have the disinherited bastard boy. Harriel's black hair was braided down her back, cheeks flushed, and her eyes looked extra green in the winter light. Harriel had the bounce in her steps and light on her face from those who relished in being able to reach the skies with little regard for the potential fall. Though if anyone had earned that confidence, it would be someone able to walk on air. "Your Grace," Lady Harriel curtsied. "Lady Harriel." Alicent greeted her with the best smile she could muster, one that fell away when she glanced to the other and said shortly, "Bela?" Within proximity of the beasts, Alicent became less certain about this idea. It was a risk to the inhabitants of the castle to station a dragon here. "I am sorry, Your Grace," Lady Harriel said softly. "I heard of what befell Aegon, about his leg. It's a terrible thing to happen, and I hope you will inform me if I can be of any assistance." "You already have," Alicent said. She looked pointedly towards the dragons. "Sir Criston told me you went to release Sunfire on your own." Alicent had never dared venture into the stone tunnels below the dragon pit. She'd heard of what befell the unfortunate handlers who came across a restless dragon on a bad day. The implications of how Harriel had gone in despite the dangers hadn't passed her by. Of all the people, from Alicent's father talking as if Aegon was to be mourned instead of aided, to Viserys' absence from his son's sickbed, it was Harriel Potter who'd gone out of her way for Aegon. Why her? It wasn't her place. The witch was brought to Westeros by Daemon, and had since served as Rhaenyra's ward. Raised amongst the bastards, and still she'd gone into the dragon's den alone, when no one else dared. Alicent herself had not dared. Despite her foreignness, close friendship with Bela, a regard for Rhaenyra and the queer magics, Alicent found it hard to hold it against her. She was of the few who'd kept acting with honor in a way she did experience much at the Red Keep. It was refreshing, yet sad, knowing it'd fade away soon enough. "Not entirely alone," Lady Harriel said, gesturing towards her dragon. "Norbert aided me, and a dragon handler showed me the way. It's dark there, and I didn't know which tunnel to take." "Yet you went." Harriel looked uncomfortable. "It went well, and in the end, it was no harder for me than what the dragon handlers do daily with the other dragons. And it was Bela's idea to try this." "It was," Bela agreed. Alicent faced her good daughter. Bela's idea? What was she trying this time? The fact riders feel strongest when close to their dragons is an old, well-known fact, even if Bela was the first to mention it to you, Lady Harriel. "Oh." I knew Ariel could release Sunfire with her magic, and I would have flown out myself, but I can't leave the castle, so I had to talk your sons into agreeing," Bela said, her purple eyes tightening. Eamon didn't want to. "Perchance because your idea was to send Lady Ariel into the den of a displeased dragon, and unlike some, my son happens to value the life of his betrothed," Allison said, retaining enough spite in her quiet words that Bela flinched. The child had some gall, acting the concerned wife now, when she behaved like an ungrateful brat since the betrothal was announced. She'd been given the king's oldest son for a husband, but reacted worse than Rhaenyra when Jason Lannister tried to court her. Alicent's mistake was expecting the bare minimum of duty and honor from the daughter of Laena Velaryon, but no. Bela was her father's child through and through, where her lawful spouse was nothing a hunting trip or a tall tower couldn't fix. Uncomfortable by the tension, Lady Ariel shifted and tilted her head back to look for distractions in the sky. But in the time since Alicent left Aegon's chamber, her sons had flown out of sight, likely returning their dragons to their nests. Considering how badly things were going, they couldn't risk losing Lady Ariel with premature moves. It was folly, as she knew Rhaenyra would take advantage of such a blunder on their end. Alicent knew her father preferred striking first. It was in an attempt to keep a move ahead without giving the opposition a chance to keep up, to win the conflict before it could become a battle. But this time he was wrong. Her father underestimated Aegon's strength, and he overestimated Aemon's capacity for forgiveness. If Aemon was made to pursue the throne in Aegon's stead, only to lose Ariel, the magic, the inhabitants on Cracklaw, and the kingship it was supposed to be all for because it turned out Aegon did not die, he'd set vermithor on his own grandfather. Regardless, Alicent had learned her lesson, and would sooner see her sons married to foreigners who would protect them from dragonfire, than wed to a treacherous cousin who'd lured them to the edge of slippery towers. "You should head inside, Bela. I want to have a word with Lady Ariel in private." Alicent wondered if she'd try to pull something again, as she did whenever she made her public visits to Aegon's chambers to try to fool the court into thinking she cared whether Aegon lived or died. But when Ariel nodded instead of protesting, Bela decided not to push it. "You'll come see me later?" Ariel nodded. "We can do something fun tomorrow." "It's only the afternoon. You can come by my chamber later." Yes," Ariel said, if a little slower than her former agreement. Once Bela was out of earshot, Alicent was able to let down her shoulders. "Forgive my shortness, Lady Ariel. It's been a trying day." "Of course, Your Grace," Ariel said. "I can't imagine. What happened is awful, and I do hope Sunfire's proximity will make a difference." "As do I," she agreed with feeling. Dragons had strange powers, and maybe magic could heal in ways beyond the Maesters. "Sir Kristen told me you arrived from Dragonstone and was flagged down on Aemon's orders, but what brings you back so soon?" The signal flag was a red flag that remained a tradition within House Targaryen since they'd been dragon lords of Old Valyria, where waving a red flag from the top of the castle meant all dragons must land. Sometimes it was flagged because of danger, sometimes for order, and sometimes because Targaryens got so swept up in flying they didn't show up for supper unless reminded by the castle staff. It was said that over a century ago, when Aegon and his sister wives conquered Westeros, the Fresh King had to flag down Rhaenys at least once a week, because the younger queen spent more time in the air than the other two combined. Aemon had used the same method to get Ariel to land with Norbert, so they could aid with releasing Sunfire. "I left rather abruptly last week, and though Helena informed me of how Aegon was faring up to the day she left, I wanted to hear how he was doing now, and possibly hear if there was any news about Fang," Lady Ariel explained. "Of course. Their dead dog, kidnapped from the kennels and tortured in the black cells. It was a slight against Lord Rubius' guest rights, and Ariel deserved better as an honored lady promised to her son." Alicent remembered being informed of the situation in the middle of carrying Aegon from the foot of the belfry up to his chambers. Safe to say, she'd been distracted. She'd barely spared a thought to it since, except for when her father was talking. Alicent had a bad feeling about who was behind it, though she couldn't grasp any motive. "I have no news regarding your dog," she said, and technically she wasn't lying. Her father had mentioned the guard had gone missing the day after the wedding. He'd been stationed in the Black Cells, but he hadn't had a chance to learn anything from him, except it was strange he was gone after 5 years of steadfast service. Aemond was looking into it, but I don't know what he may have learned, as I've been preoccupied with Aegon, she added. You must be weary from your flight. You have the hospitality as our honored guest, Hariel. What happened last time will never happen again. You have my word. Though I regret it became necessary to stress the matter. Please finish with the dragon soon and join me inside. Aemond would be vexed with me if you catch a cold. I'd like to, but I have to see to Norbert first. Hariel gestured to her dragon. I meant for her to fly back to Dragonstone, but... She trailed off, abashed. What's the issue? Hariel glanced back and forth between her dragon and the queen, but had little choice but to answer truthfully. Norbert won't leave, she admitted. I told Norbert to fly home, but she keeps... playing with Sunfire. As they talked, the dragons began circling each other, like lions readying to pounce on the opposition. Tails swishing and snorting heat that made it seem like fog hung above the yard. Alicent wasn't sure playing was the correct word. You've lost control of her again. No, I haven't, Hariel insisted, then added, not in any way that matters. When I've told Norbert to go home, she responds with, not yet. I'd say that means she's heeding my orders, but bending the rules a bit. Is that so? I promise to keep an eye on her until she leaves, Your Grace. No one will get hurt and nothing ruined. I doubt she'll keep this up for too long. I know Norbert prefers Dragonstone to King's Landing, and she's protective of her nest at home. She's been anxious about Dreamfire moving to the Dragonmount, and worried Helena's dragon might try to claim her nest. Though I doubt she needs to worry about that. It's too close to the other dragons, and Dreamfire prefers her space. That's true. Alicent smiled, hoping the expression wasn't as sad as she felt. Do you mind walking with me around the courtyard to keep warm? She gestured to the path that went around the sides of the yard, and Hariel followed her lead. It was their largest courtyard, part garden and park, and in summer there were flowers and fruit trees, but it looked quite different now. Her daughter's absence did not feel real. With Aegon's injury, Alicent had been too preoccupied with her son to protect the rest. While she had sat at her son's sickbed, Rhaenyra had gone behind her back and convinced the king to hand over Helena. They were already betrothed, but Alicent had planned to delay that union as long as possible. Viserys would not live forever. But now... How is Helena faring on Dragonstone? She asked. From what she's told, it's gone well, and she's busying herself settling in. Lady Rosalie Risley caught a cold on the voyage over to Dragonstone, but no one else got sick, and she looks to have made a full recovery, Hariel said, either unaware or pretending not to notice her queen's displeasure. She's not familiar with the differences yet, such as the wind echoing through the castle, the salt and sulfur smells of the volcano and the castle of Dragonstone itself. Princess Rhaenyra's made sure she's taken care of, but it's an adjustment, and I think it would be for anyone experiencing their first move. Helena shouldn't need to adjust in the first place. Viserys tried to claim Rhaenyra was trying to do right by Alicent by forcing Helena to marry Jacaerys, but it was amongst the biggest insults Alicent had been faced with yet. Inexplicably, both had deluded themselves into believing the situation could be rectified by forcing a princess to marry a bastard. In what deluded nightmare did they live to try and claim such was acceptable? Alicent hadn't even been able to tell Helena goodbye when she left. To overcome with disgust at what was happening. With Aegon in such a bad condition, she'd been too overwhelmed to handle this too. It made Alicent wish she could go back a couple moons in time, to those few days between Sir Laenor's death and her wedding to Daemon, and suggest to Rhaenyra, everything can be made right if you only marry a bastard. She'd have dearly enjoyed Rhaenyra's outraged reaction to such an insult. This was the same woman who once claimed Alicent, as merely the daughter of a landless second son, wasn't a suitable bride for a king, that Viserys should have married Laena Velaryon as was proper, yet she refused to acknowledge her own hypocrisy. Alicent thought she'd seen the depths of Rhaenyra's spitefulness, but she'd been proven wrong. as Rhaenyra was doing her utmost to shame Helaena by soiling her with a bastard. How come she did not feel like putting herself into such a plight? There were plenty of bastards of royal Targaryen ancestry on Dragonstone. Rhaenyra could have had her pick of them, but no. For her, the suitors could be no less impressive than the heir to Driftmark or Prince Daemon. Yet even her illicit paramour hadn't been a lowly bastard. Harwin Strong was a High Lord whom Rhaenyra had been perfectly free to marry, had she just accepted Aegon as the rightful heir. Helaena was Alicent's only daughter, and imagining her married to that... It's made her blood boil. That was not doing right by Alicent or the realm. It was only yet another insult added to the ever-growing list of offences, whilst Rhaenyra kept flaunting spoiled privileges, which even kings weren't permitted. The kingdom would rebel if Viserys named a bastard heir to the throne. Those deluded to think otherwise were courting dividing chaos, which is why the likes of Daemon favoured it. High Lord Corlys rejected the bastard Lucerys as heir to Driftmark in favour of the legitimate Prince Viserys, passing over Visenya too, was only the first taste of reality Rhaenyra would be made to face. The princess was growing ever shameless, and Alicent would never forgive her. Not for Helaena. If she didn't get her daughter back untouched by that strong bastard, she would strangle Rhaenyra cold or die by dragonfire trying. That was her rage talking though. Alicent found it easier to be angry than sad. If she let the full extent of her sorrows out, it'd surely consume her. I appreciate that you're looking after my daughter. Helaena values her true friendships at a time like this. Alicent said, You have been a good friend to my children. You saved Aemond from Dragonfire, and you went against Sunfire for Aegon's sake. Your magic can do wonders. You're very kind, my queen. You've been open and generous with your magic. The substance Lord Rubius puts the dragon eggs in has caused the rates of hatchings per egg clutch to double, and the growth rates they enjoy is noteworthy. Rhaena's dragon is nearing the same size as Lucerys' dragon, though Ebion is 6 years younger than Aerys. Your magic solves issues in ways isn't available to the rest of us, in ways we don't know it can be solved, Alicent said. She cast a glance at Sunfire, musing whether he'd have grown bigger if hatched by Lord Rubius. Norbert swished her tail, hitting the side of Sunfire's leg, and he snarled and snapped the air by the sea dragon's throat. It looked and sounded violent, and yet Alicent saw it now. This was playing. They were having fun, and Alicent resented Sunfire's ability to have fun when his master was so badly injured. She took a deep breath and prepared herself to ask what she needed of the girl. I want to ask you, regarding Aegon, aside from getting Sunfire, is there something you can do to heal him? Alicent did not care for the regretful expression she made. Your Grace, back in our homeland there are magics wizards and witches could perform for his kind of injury. Hagrid told me so. Madame Pomfrey, a witch from home, could have made Aegon as good as new. But that is them, and neither Hagrid nor I are healers, Your Grace. I hear from Aemond and Helaena your potential is beyond what I understand. And already I know you can do all sorts of magic. You can fly, cast fire without fuel, take the heat out of dragonfire, create ice and make things smaller or bigger, levitate things no man can carry, and change substances from one thing into another. Why is this branch of magic so different? Why not try? Aegon is fighting for his life. He needs aid. Because it's different to practice on a rock than on a human, Your Grace. I can make as many mistakes as I want on a rock without it harming anyone, but that's not the case with healing magic. To learn how to heal, I would have to teach myself spells by practicing on someone alive. Yet unlike my people at home, where there are masters at the craft to guide their pupils, we have no such things, and no one to correct any potential mistakes. But it's possible, with your magic. Ariel was becoming frustrated, but she wasn't the one with a broken son being turned down for what sounded more akin to a "I don't want to" answer than a "it's impossible." I have 2 hands and a general understanding of how an amputation works. It's just sawing through a leg, is it not? But it does not mean I know how to amputate a leg without killing them, Your Grace. It's no different with magic. I need the base knowledge and practice, and I have no way to retain that when I have no practice target or spells to work off. I need to experiment to figure it out, and that's a timely thing. Experimenting? Allison thought she understood. It wasn't an issue regarding her potential. She said herself it was possible. It was a matter of practice and opportunity. This was Aegon, her firstborn, the rightful heir, and Alicent herself was the queen. It wasn't pleasant having to resort to this, but the alternative was worse, and she had the power to grant her what she needed. What if the prisoners sentenced to death? You could practice on them. Prisoners? Ariel stared at Alicent blankly, but with a spark of alarm growing in her expressive eyes. I didn't mean... Ariel shook her head. No, they're people too, Your Grace. Ariel's strong reaction made Alicent wonder if she'd done something wrong, but... no. Aye, they were people, but the worst sort. They were vile peasants who'd earned their death sentence, and why could they not serve the realm first? Once dead, they were going straight to the Seven Hells, and there was nothing they could suffer in life that'd be worse than what awaited them there because of their own bad choices. If a practice target was what Ariel required, why could the prisoners not serve for such? They who betrayed the kingdom would have the chance to make up for their crimes in some small way, and even if they suffered, they would die soon enough. And letting them serve a greater purpose may make the Seven who are one judge them in a kinder light. Did your heart grow feeble with your dog's death? Alicent asked wryly. I don't recall you showing this much compassion and regard towards the guards you attacked last week. Ariel's expression darkened. You think those two things comparable? No one was permanently injured by my spells, while they heard Fang's screams but did nothing. Knowingly or not, they aided whoever tortured him. I will not apologize for trying to save my dog against those who caused him harm, even if he did it on orders, and that is not what you're saying, is it? That they were right in doing so? Of course not, but you are defending your attacks on the guards when those prisoners are murderers, rapists and traitors to the realm. Why would you defend the depraved? They've already been caught and are not a threat to anyone, Ariel rebuffed. I attacked the guards because I had no other choice. Because my dog was dying and they first tried to prevent me getting to him and then they tried to imprison me for finding out what they were hiding. This is different. This is... Ariel didn't finish the sentence. Two walked up to give a proper argument. She looked towards the dragons, and when she spoke, it was like she was speaking to them. Fang was imprisoned and tortured too, Your Grace. And just because Fang died soon after, that didn't make the pain he faced in his last hours any less monstrous. Blade or magic, it doesn't matter what tool is used. I have no more right to play with someone else's life than the man who flayed Fang did. I will not do that to a dog, nor would I do it to a human. Alicent was reminded of something Aemond had complained of before. How Ariel was too kind. Alicent had in mind to use a different word for her though. She was too soft, like Viserys. He too couldn't handle conflict whenever he was made to look at it. Softness was a weakness. What was the point of her magics when Ariel couldn't use it when it mattered? If Alicent had that gift, she would have been able to fix so many injustices, and nothing would have been able to stop her, not even the king. I didn't ask you to torture or cripple anyone. I never would. I offered you a path to learn healing because you said you lacked opportunity to practice. You didn't intend to, but that would have likely been the outcome, Your Grace, Ariel said fiercely. Alicent swallowed down a wave of anger. Did she know she was getting insolent towards her own queen? Clearly Rhaenyra was starting to damage this lady as thoroughly as she'd ruined Baela. Except... Rhaenyra would have agreed with Alicent on this matter. I could accidentally kill someone. I could maim them forever. So much could go wrong. I once tried to make my chamber door stop creaking, but my charm accidentally melted it into oil. But what if that was a human? You are a smart, accomplished woman and hold all the abilities required to perform an amputation, Your Grace. But I ask you, did you cut Aegon's leg off today, or did you leave the task to the expertise of the maesters? Ariel took a step closer, looking beseeching and worried and maybe even a little scared. I know this is your son and you need this, but please understand, The Maesters don't allow acolytes and novices to perform amputations for a reason. And for me it's harder still. I don't only have to learn a branch of magic I do not know, but I have no books or teachers to learn from, which means I must reinvent the chants before I could perform them safely. That can go badly. That's how I melted my door, because I was testing magics I didn't have a spell for, and had unforeseen consequences. You won't aid my son, that's what you're telling me. Not with healing magics, no. She shook her head. It's not that I don't want to aid him. I do. I truly wish I could help Aegon. I wish I could have saved Fang. That I could have prevented Sir Laenor from dying, healed baby Emma of her shivers, and saved Lena and her son too. But I can't. Even magic must be wielded with understanding and mastery, because using the wrong spell is worse than no spell at all, and I would never risk your son. A loud crash cut Hariel off, and they both looked quickly towards the dragons. Norbert had smacked her tail into the ground, the cluster of horns at the end so strong and the limbs so powerful it had sunken deep into the stone slab. The dragon growled and yanked her tail to get it loose, but she needed 2 pulls before she wrenched it free. The witch pointed her stick at the torn ground, moved her hand in an arced pattern and said, Reparo. A shimmering glow fluttered from the tip of the stick. Not a true, solid thing, almost more akin to a fast-moving smoke that shimmered. It soared across the air and engulfed the damage her dragon caused. Before her eyes, the wound made in the ground was healed up within a few heartbeats, returning it to its previous state without a sign it was ever damaged to begin with. You tell me that magic you just performed can't aid my son? It was torn and now it is healed. Why can't you do that for Aegon? Because it is magic not meant for living beings, Ariel said quietly. Because a slab of rock is different from the intricacy of a human body with blood, flesh and bones. Because a human body reacts different to being reshaped that way and so fast than a rock that is not alive. I have magic, but that magic has limits. Maybe you're the queen, and maybe you don't know what it's like to have limits, but I do. If anything, that was the first thing Hariel explained which Alicent did know. The child wouldn't be the first blinded by the royalty and title of queen. The 7 new Alicent once had, and she'd felt the limitations of her body more fiercely after she became queen than before. Yet she was speaking sense, even if it was in a strange, magical way that was hard to grasp. A part of Alicent wasn't entirely convinced. Could she not just do it? Everything else looked so easy. It didn't make sense why this would give her issue, especially when she claimed it was perfectly possible in her homeland, though it sounded like their magic had a logic to it, limitations and rules beyond what Alicent had been told. But Hariel had sounded earnest, and there was no reason for her to lie either. I do, Alicent admitted. The fight drained out of her, giving way for her old, familiar comrade named Defeat. Each time things were starting to look up, she'd be punished cruelly for her naivete. She'd thought getting Bela would be a victory against Rhaenyra, but instead Bela had been a curse. Though she'd also once thought badly of Hariel, but she'd been proven wrong there. Alicent reached out, grasping Hariel's hand in her own. I may not fully understand your magic, but I do understand the frustration of limitations. I feel it keenly these days too. She squeezed the hand reassuringly, then stepped back. Pardon my shortness, but as you cannot help, I think I will take my leave. I need to go see my son. I can't heal him, but there are other things I can do. Hagrid had a friend who didn't have a leg either. He had a fake one, and there are charms. I appreciate a considerate offer. Alicent cut her off. She didn't want to think of fake legs. She wanted Aegon to be whole again. I will send for you if your input is needed. Aemon should be back soon, so if you need anything, it's better you go to him. He may be a little disagreeable, she said, unable to find a better phrase for his attitude these days. Sullen, temperamental. Alicent couldn't tell Hariel what caused it, but she could do damage control until she could talk sense into her father. He's been deeply affected by Aegon's injury too, but I know he would enjoy your company for supper. Supper? I don't want to impose, your grace. I arrived without forewarning, and I don't mind eating with the rest. He's your betrothed, and you're not imposing when you are invited, Alicent said with finality. She had no patience with her father's schemes. Aegon would live. With or without his leg, Aegon held the true claim, and there wasn't a reason to put her sons in such a position when they'd already won Harriel to their side. Treating her well was the least she deserved. There was too much risk involved when Harriel had tight bonds to Rhaenyra's lot, because what if she realized why she was being pushed towards Daeron? She might very well tell others. Thank you, Your Grace. I know how untimely my visit is, but I'll go see him. And Bella too. Curiously, it almost sounded as if Harriel had hoped for a different answer. I thought I'd have the whole day, but the hours are passing faster than I expected. It is? Alicent had felt the opposite. The day had been slow and agonizingly long, and it wasn't even supper yet. If you'll excuse me, I will see you later, Lady Harriel. Cold and frustrated, Alicent made to leave the courtyard, her feet leaving soggy imprints in the muddy snow, and feeling the contemplative stare of a witch on her back, disappointed to realize the gift of magic might be a little like being queen. As overwhelming as Harriel's magic seemed, she too was rendered powerless by a lack of support, a lack of opportunity to reach her potential. Just as by the laws of Westeros the queen should be the most powerful woman in the realm, respected, secure and influential, but her husband had changed the rules of her station upon their marriage. What use was the promised power of a queenship, which was the reason she'd married the king, for the sake of her family, when Viserys made sure the only ones her powers could protect were everyone except the people she loved? If Viserys had magic like Harriel's, then it was like he'd forgotten the fundamentals, and now kept weaving the wrong spells. Attempting to heal House Targaryen, but only making it worse. Trying to use Reparo on the living family he'd broken, yet kept acting surprised that it didn't work, despite being told time and again its mending effect only worked on dead stone.